Hello, everyone.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Please make yourself comfortable as we let a few other folks in. We'll get started in just a moment. Really happy to see both familiar names, people we know who've been doing this work for a long time, as well as new folks joining us. Adam, you'll let me know when I can get started.
Yep, we can start.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We've got people joining us from many parts of the country today to this webinar that is being hosted by the Rainbow Coalition for Refuge and those of us on the Rainbow Refugee team. Rainbow Refugee is the proud steward of the Rainbow Refugee Assistance Partnership, and all of our partners in the Rainbow Coalition for Refuge are really pleased that you're here today. And we want to acknowledge the funding that we've received to help with this webinar from Immigration, Refugees, Citizenship Canada as part of our project of enhancing private sponsorship to be more responsive and more protective for LGBTQI refugees. And so members, that's okay. Members of the coalition, we'll just go to the next, there we go. As you can see, stretched from Halifax all the way to us out here in BC. And so our work is very much part of a collaboration.
And we are honored, and we would like to say that as Rainbow Refugee, we are gathered here today on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We do this work and we respectfully acknowledge the First Nations and Indigenous people, and we see our work as a larger effort towards decolonizing and being in solidarity with Indigenous sovereignty. That being said, hello everyone again. My name is Norma Lies. I am the communications manager at Rainbow Refugee. I recently joined the communications team. Probably some of you might know me as the sponsorship coordinator previously. I am a trans activist and advocate from the Middle East. I'm a refugee in Vancouver. I moved here in 2018, shortly became a member with Rainbow Refugee and then a staff member. And I'm honored to be here with you today. I'm sorry I'm off camera. I just got back from a sick leave and I prefer to be off camera for now. And Charlene.
Thank you. Norma, we're happy to have you here in any capacity you can be.
Thank you.
Yeah. My name's Sherilyn. I use she or they pronouns. I've been volunteering with Rainbow Refugee since 2004 and currently serve as board chair. The other kind of perspectives that I bring to this work, I'm trained as a counseling psychologist and worked with my partner through the organization Legit for recognition using humanitarian and compassionate grounds to be able to stay in Canada. And passing it on to Lama.
And yeah, and my name is Lama Olabi. I am the new sponsorship coordinator. So if you've known Norma before, hi, I'm just taking over. I joined a Rainbow Refugee as a sponsorship coordinator like 2 months back, and I have been volunteering with Rainbow Refugee since 2017, a month after I arrived to Canada, as a privately sponsored refugee myself, originally coming from the Middle East. I use pronouns. My pronouns are she, they. Feel free to use either or for me during the session. with that said, during this session, we're trying to make it as interactive as possible. So to start us off, please let us know in the chat box your name, your pronouns, where are you coming from today? How are you arriving to the session today? Your role as and your connection to LGBTQ and queer refugees to Canada. Let us know where you're joining us from, on which Indigenous lands, and you can do so by either raising your hand, so you would move you into the interactive space so you can unmute yourself and participate with us. Just know that if you choose to do so, you will be, as mentioned in the beginning, you'll be recorded, and that recording will be part of the resource hub, or you can use, as some of you have already started doing so, you can use the chat box and the chat box to do this exercise. So again, I'm just going to go back a little bit to remind you, everyone, that we would like to know your names, your pronouns, how are you joining us today, and what is your connection to LGBTQ refugee protection and settlement in Canada. And thank you, everyone. Okay, I'm going to let you folks do that in the chat box. While we move on to our community agreements, it's important that we create or thrive to create a safe space for everyone to learn and engage in this session. So please remember that collectively we know a lot, but we don't know everything as individuals ourselves. Make sure to we would love your engagement. We'd love your participation. So take space as much to the extent that you're comfortable doing so, and also allow others to take space as well. So while you take space, make space for others to share their voices and have their voices be heard. Remember that personal information or personal experiences that are shared in here will remain in the session. You can take the listen and share it with other people. However, anything that's personal remains in the session. The topics in the discussion that we're going to have today might create a sense of discomfort, and that is okay. Try to lean into that discomfort, but also remember to take care of yourself. If you need to take a break, if you need to grab some water, if you need to just step away, take some breath, ground yourself, by all means do so. There's no judgment on that. So just remember that as we go through the session. Charlene?
Thank you. Before we go any further, I wanted to also give Alex a chance to introduce themselves and really invite people who have, I see just from the people who are here as attendees that there is lots of experience here. And so I'm hoping that you'll feel comfortable kind of stepping into the interactive space. If you raise your hand, Adam will move you in. And that way we can have more of at least some of us have more of a conversational and interactive presentation. And also understand if you want to stay off camera and stay in the webinar audience, that's fine too. But Alex, please take a moment.
Thank you so much, Charlene. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the co-executive director of programming and advocacy for Rainbow Refugee, also an active participant of the Rainbow Coalition for Refuge, and in my other hat, also the president of the Canadian Council for Refugees. And I really welcome you all to this very important session, and glad to see Charlene and Lama leading them. I'm sure that it will be great and you'll get your answers to all the questions that you have. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, our plan for today is to orient everyone to the global context where there's very uneven protection and persecution around sex and gender diversity. And so what this means for LGBTQI people who are forced to migrate. This will be familiar to many of you, but we want to sort of ground us all in that knowledge. And then we'll move into the Canadian context, touch on sort of the situation in terms of legal rights and realities. And we'll do this through some examples. We've got a story from an interview and then sort of a scenario that we'll discuss. And what we hope comes out of this for all of you is a bit of a conversation guide, as well as some tools that will help you support conversations with newcomers that you may be sponsoring or who are arriving through private sponsorship, to support them to understand their rights, their responsibilities, realities they may face as sort of racialized, queer, trans newcomers, some of the strategies they might use to navigate situations, and the resources and recourses available to them.
Thank you, Charlene. With that said, let's take a look at our approach to sponsorship. When we're discussing sponsorship in general, we're looking at it from an intersectional anti-oppression lens. It is looked at as an act of solidarity. It's not an act of bringing someone here or supporting someone through this, or saving someone's life. We look at sponsorship as an act of solidarity with other folks, in a sense that we are centering the person, the newcomer in this process. Our approach is trauma and violence informed, and it takes into consideration a lot of aspects within the culture of safety and the decolonizing practices. Now, with that said, it's really important to note the changing of language when we're discussing human diversity. So language is different among cultures and backgrounds, and it's important to note how language differs between a Western framework from non-Western frameworks. So you would see that we would refer to LGBTQI or SOGI, SC, in a sense that after we've been using LGBTQI for quite a while now, we're moving to use SOGI, SC, in a sense that we're referring to sexual orientation, the kind of attraction that is presented in different individuals, whether they are gay, lesbian, or bisexual. We use gender identity and expression to kind of like cover this wide kind of definition of what is being trans, is what language to use to talk about trans folks, or for trans folks to express themselves and identify as well. So that covers a big topic of transgender identity, non-binary, gender non-conforming, and androgyny. We also use the SC to go back and talk about sex characteristic and diversity in sex characteristics, and things as being intersex, basically the biological sex of individuals. Keep in mind that languages, because of their differences, because of the difference in cultures, some languages are acceptable in the Western framework. Again, people might express themselves using specific language in a Western framework that is not otherwise acceptable in other cultures, and vice versa. So while we are going through this session, just keep that in mind.
Thank you, Lana. And so now we'll be looking a bit at the global context of human rights protection and persecution of SOGI-esque diversity. I want to emphasize that at an international level, there is agreement that international law and human rights protections extend to people who live their sexualities, genders in diverse ways. And this has been named and outlined in the Yogyakarta Principles in 2006 that were revised in 2017. But this is not a binding agreement. And what you'll see is that over half of the countries that are UN member states do not extend human rights protection to people who are LGBTQI or sex or gender diverse. And so that means that more than 114 countries are places where people will have lived with and through housing discrimination, unsafe housing conditions, uneven job protection, overt, explicit job discrimination, and no protection from hate crimes.
And as you can see, this is a map from ILGA. As you can see over here, at least 68 countries criminalize same-sex relationships, and at least 57 countries criminalize gender diversity. So things like dressing as either genders, if expressing your gender through clothes, expressing your genders through a name, or seeking a documentation to change your name or your gender marker on documentations as well.
Something that we think is important to keep in mind is that all of these criminal sanctions, the vast majority of them, are the legacy of colonization. And so what you'll see is countries colonized by Britain have the same penal code provisions that are used to criminalize sexuality or gender. Similarly, countries colonized by Spain tend to use their morality codes as ways in persecutory ways. And so you'll see patterns across geography. This also then ends up being a source of strength, and next slide please, in the sense that advocates, lawyers, activists can share strategies, legal strategies, political strategies across borders to work against these colonial laws. So here we see a headline from India and the work there being done, shared with lawyers and activists in Kenya. And so traction to build human rights protection is gaining ground. At the same time, it's important for us to recognize that it's not just relationships or individuals' sexual or gender identity and expression that's under penalty. It's the very right to organize to protect rights. And so we see here the example of Tunisia, where LGBTQ rights organizations have been shut down. This is true in many parts of the world. The other piece we want to emphasize is ways that country conditions on the ground can vary widely from sort of the laws on paper, and that there's massive flux in them. And so Brazil is a country where, although there was very public, huge celebrations of Pride, some of the largest in the world, it is also a place that has had some of the highest rates of homophobic and transphobic violence in the world. And that was before Bolsonaro came in. And countries that have excellent human rights protection, so the example of Ecuador is a country with a really strong constitution, at the same time can be places where within religious institutions there are conditions of persecution. So in Ecuador, there are over 300 conversion therapy camps. And so I want to emphasize the roles of the medical system and religious institutions, layered onto or sometimes alongside laws. When people do need to leave their countries, quite often they are going to countries within the same region that have similar social, legal, religious, or morality sanctions against sex and gender diversity. And then they also face, as you know, as sponsors, the additional surveillance and threat because of their status as asylum seekers or undocumented, potentially unable to work, and therefore have restrictions on housing. And Lama, oh no, this part's, yeah. What this means for people, we want to emphasize that all forms of persecution are reprehensible and wrong. There are some distinct characteristics of SOGS persecution that have important implications for people who are coming here. It often starts in families, often at a very young age, and places that would normally be safe, families, schools, workplaces, are actually places where people face surveillance. And so people have learned how to hide, how to cover, how to be very careful in how they negotiate their own safety. It is also a very isolating form of persecution. And so sometimes sort of keeping to yourself is actually a safer way to be. These survival tactics, these ways of surviving, do not end just because somebody leaves their country. And so kind of holding that in mind as you prepare yourself to have conversations with newcomers is important. So,
Yeah, thank you, Charlene. So again, it's important now as we're moving into the context, in the Canadian context on the human rights and SC protections in Canada, it's important to know that yes, Canada is relatively a safe country that has a lot of laws and a lot of protections for racialized queer and newcomers and other folks as well. And that is part of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. However, that wasn't the reality. That wasn't the reality of things when before decriminalizing of same-sex relationships. And I'm going to take this moment to kind of do a bit of a pop quiz. So in the chat box, let me know if you have an idea on when was same-sex relations decriminalized in Canada. If you know the year, just pop it in a chat. Let me know. What do you think of that? Basically, Canada now, it is one of the countries that has some excellent human rights protections. However, it wasn't that way. So we've gotten few guesses. Okay, so I don't know, should I give you, we have another question. Okay, so the actual date for decriminalization of same-sex relations was in fact in 1969. So kudos to everyone who picked that up. And another question for other folks, when did when was there any kind of benefits that recognized partners of same-sex relationships in Canada? So when was partnership as same-sex marriage or same-sex relationship was recognized? That includes things like taxes, I believe. Charlene, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. But not marriage at this point. So
not marriage, still not marriage.
So
okay.
Recognizing the equality rights for people of diverse sexual orientation.
So we are getting some answers that is kind of close to the date. So it was throughout 1995 and 1996. Now here's a thinker for you. When do you think when do you think the gender marker changed and started to be present on documents? So like on passport or people who are non-binary or transgender, when did they get the chance to actually reassign or have their gender changed on documents? Okay.
People are quick on that one.
Yeah.
Nice.
2020. Okay, only changed a year or so ago. So the change actually started in 2016 through 2017. There is a lot of work to be done still. This is an entire process of work in progress still, but that change is very recent. And again, it happened throughout 2016 to 2017. Now, again, this was not the reality of things. Things weren't as easy as we all know. There in 1971 there was a lot of even before that, prior to that, there was a lot of police harassment that manifested in things like police raids on queer spaces, arrests for queer and BIPOC queer folks. There was a lot of job discriminations. There was a lot of bans in the military and a lot of immigration bans. So in 1971, a group of 200 gay and lesbian trans people gathered at the parliament to demand an end to all of the discrimination and the harassment. And as you can see, these are screenshots or snippets from one of the oldest queer magazines, Pink Triangle Press, in Canada. So this is just to give you an idea that even though Canada has moved so far into protecting queer folks and their rights, there is still a lot of work to be done, because the reality, as people who are living in Canada, it might be easier for us, but that the reality for folks who are coming from different countries, for refugees, is that things are still different. And we do have a story for you that I'm going to let Norma
Thank you
take it
so
from
much.
here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lama, for the information that you shared. And for the next few slides, folks, I'll be sharing with you an experience, a story of a newcomer. I just want to give you some content advisory. You will hear some transphobia, racism, and violence. This interview was shared with consent. And this story is Mariam's story. Mariam is a trans woman. She's an overseas claimant, and she's from a Middle Eastern country. The story starts by Mariam saying, "When I came to Canada, I was so happy. I can't describe it. But my happiness didn't last for a long time. It was only 5 or 6 days. It wasn't even a week. I was in a refugee transition house on a downtown street. They were very nice to me. They said, 'This is a free country. You can do what you want.' And I said, 'Can I wear makeup?' They said, 'You won't have any problems. You can wear makeup. You can go anywhere. People are very educated here.' And I thought, oh my God, I'm just dreaming. That first week, one night I tried to walk to Granville Street. A guy attacked me. He asked me something, I don't know what. I told him, 'Sorry, no money, no money.' He looked at me and said, excuse the language, 'You look like a fucking faggot.' I'm sorry for swearing. I just want to let you know, I didn't know exactly what faggot means. I just knew that fucking has a bad meaning. I didn't say anything. I just ran away. And he said it again, and he hit me and tried to beat me. And I just ran away. It was so that I just ran away back to the refugee house. It was so terrible for me. All my dreams disappeared. Nowhere can I be safe. Can I be myself? Nowhere can I be happy. I just cried, and I went to the manager and said, 'You told me that this is a free country. You told me here I can be safe. And a guy just attacked me on the street.' And he said, 'Oh my God, it never happens here. Do you want me to call the police?' And I said, 'What the police can do?' Because I had a very bad experience of the police before. And it was very strange for me. Nobody on the street helped me. They saw that the guy attacked me, but they did nothing. Nobody even asked the guy, 'What's wrong with you? Why did you attack her?' This story, we shared this story with you folks so it can lead us to a discussion. But before we go to the discussion, we just want to say that this experience of the person, of the social worker that supported this person, we don't want to single out the social worker. It can be any person supporting any newcomer going through a similar experience. The discussion is going to be around, can I wear makeup? What assumptions was the settlement worker making, or whoever is supporting the newcomer? What did Mariam need to make an empowered decision about wearing makeup? And how could the settlement worker have empowered Mariam to walk around the city? If you can share your comments with us via chat, or I will open the floor as well to Sherilyn and Lama to support.
And again, folks, you can, as always, just raise your hand, and Adam would help us into, letting you interact with us. So we'll bring you into the interactive space.
I know there's lots of expertise in the room, so we'd really love, let's maybe start with that first question about kind of unpacking some of the assumptions that are at work when the settlement worker said, "Oh, it's a free country. You can wear makeup." Yeah, I'm seeing Gloria. Gloria, would you like to share out loud? Thank you for joining us. This is great.
Okay, for me, I feel as though the settlement worker was assuming the fact that everyone in Canada is okay with the different gender identities and sexualities, which is not really the case. Many people do have assumptions about Canada. Myself, I'm an immigrant, so when you move to Canada, you assume things are different as compared to other places. And I think also when you get here, sometimes people tell you that. People even assume like the bus is free, the train is free, you're given free food. So there are so many assumptions out there in the world, in the rest of the countries, that people don't really know about. So when you get here, then you get that shock because there are still people, even this year in 2022, who still have an issue with the different sexualities that exist in the world right here in Canada. So for me, I feel as though the assumptions that even the settlement workers have do get portrayed and expressed to newcomers who have the same assumption they've had from wherever they were.
Thank you, Gloria. Well said. Yeah, it's really important that sort of the view of Canada that is kind of projected out to the world as a place that is always accepting creates some hopes and expectations that Miriam brought with her, and that I'm seeing in the chat and from your comments. We need to help kind of complicate that and help people recognize, as people are saying in the chat, that there is a big gap between the sort of equality protections in the paper and conditions people face in their day-to-day lives. In particular, people who are walking the world sort of racialized, as well as newcomers. Lama, you wanted to add?
And I like Brandon's comment that this assumption was based on them thinking that the laws and protections available in Canada are reflective of the experiences that trans and queer folks are living day-to-day basis. However, that's not an informed reality, as Brandon mentioned. Thank you. And Alex just mentioned a good point about honesty, differences between the legal and the social. Absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in terms
Anyone
of
else?
what Miriam needs is some honest information about sort of the rights and some honesty about potential risks.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think that the worker could have provided could have empowered Miriam to walk around the city? What kind of other than the things that Miriam needed to do, what do you think the settlement workers' role would have been to better accommodate that?
A wonderful idea coming from Edgar around connecting LGBTQI newcomers with volunteers, and this could be people within the sponsorship group or sponsorship circle who know the resources and safer spaces in the city, and sort of doing an orientation to the city, to public transit that is queer and trans informed, and ideally also informed by the knowledge of people who are racialized newcomers who are queer or trans in the city. Great idea, Edgar. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Should we move to the next slide? Or do you want to give some more time?
Any other strategies people want to suggest in terms of ways that this settlement worker could support? Yeah. that there's still a need for vigilance and awareness, being aware of your surroundings, that yes, there are many ways that this may be a safer place, but vigilance and awareness is still important. I thought I saw a hand.
Yeah, I think it was Adam.
All good, no worries, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're ready to continue.
Mhm.
Yeah. We wanted to share this example because we see it as a really good example of the ways that people's safety as well as their risk or vulnerability is intersectional. And what we mean by this is people's sort of social position, their race, their gender, their migration status, their age, their ability, all of these things can kind of combine and compound to make people either more at risk or to create distinct kinds of risks. And so being aware when you're working with newcomers, what are the particular intersections that they face when they're trying to navigate safety in the city, job searches, housing searches, things like that, and being ready to have some conversations with them about that. And then some of the ways we hope you can foster these conversations is to start by signaling that you are ready to have these conversations, that you've done some thinking about this, and you actually ask in sort of open questions, have you thought about how to prepare for your job interview? How are you feeling about taking the bus for the first time? Offering respect for self-determination, and this can be shown in things like using the language and pronouns, names that the newcomer identifies with, bringing kind of a quality of respectful curiosity. So again, not making assumptions that a person will want to come out right away or won't want to come out right away, being respectful and curious about, how would you like to handle introducing yourself to a prospective employer? We're going to talk about some ways of being extra vigilant about confidentiality, because we know that newcomers are navigating their safety, with their circle group or sponsorship group, with new friends, at schools or language classes, in workplaces, in neighborhoods, and may need to be very strategic about what they share and how much of themselves they share in these different contexts. So being extra careful about confidentiality as we ask questions and as we share information with others. And then, we're going to share sort of our model for having these kinds of conversations about rights and realities as well. So next slide, please.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so go ahead, Lama.
Oh, yeah, I think you can take this one.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So you did a really good job in the Miriam example of identifying that what she needed to make an empowered decision was accurate information about her rights alongside accurate information about her realities. The fact that safety is not something that can be taken for granted. And then a conversation about strategies. So things like Edward's suggestion of walking alongside a volunteer, thinking about the times of day or neighborhoods that will feel safest and building to expand those over time. And then we always like to talk through when things go wrong, if things go wrong, what are the recourses available? So in the Miriam example, the settlement worker suggested calling the police. Could this feel safe for somebody like Miriam? might not be the recourse that she wants to use. So talking through what are some available recourses and resources. And so we're going to work through an example together of an employment situation.
Yeah, so we are looking at Afia's story. Afia is 32 years old. They're a Nigerian queer woman, and they are a trained accountant. They're also a sponsored refugee to Canada. So we're going to take a look at their experience as a queer newcomer in the Canadian workplace, and specifically in a job interview. So let's just take a look at the first part of the story. We're going to have some discussion as well afterwards. But Afia's story basically saying, I have a university degree in finance and accounting from my country, and I work as a manager and I worked as a manager in a financial department of a business for 6 years. None of that mattered when I got to Canada. After 4 months of looking for work, I hadn't found anything. I wasn't even getting interviews. A friend of my circle connected me with the owner of a small business who was looking for an accountant. I didn't really know what to expect for a job interview, what to tell them about myself and my background. So the things that we're looking at right now is that what are the things, looking from a perspective of like the employment, what are the things that specifically a queer newcomer might want to keep in mind regarding their rights, their realities? Again, how can we center that conversation around that one person? What kind of strategies can we present this person when we are supporting them to figure out, yes, thank you, Adam, when they are trying to figure out things to prepare for a job interview. So yeah, we can open up the floor for questions. Sorry. Or discussion. So just to give you a bit of an idea, Afia hadn't had a job interview. That was her first job. That was their first job interview in Canada in our Canadian workplace. So just you can imagine that going to a job interview, first of all, it is a stressful experience for all of us, regardless of where we're coming from, our languages, our differences, our identities. Going to a job interview is a stressful experience on its own. Now add to that the extra layers of not knowing whether the space is going to be safe for me to, like, basically for Afia to present either in a masculine or a feminine way or in a non-binary way. Is it a safe place if asked about their partner or if asked about their marital status? What should they do? Do they even need to answer that? So things like that, just keep that in mind as we kind of discuss the kind of strategies, the rights and the realities that FIA would need to know to empower themselves to kind of like take on the right steps when they're going through, when they're going into the workforce in Canada. Charlene, do you have anything to add?
I would love to give people who are joining us just a chance to share, if you were going to be in the position of talking with Afia about this possible job interview, what kind of homework would you want to do?
I can see Krishna.
Krishna. Thank you, Krishna, for being brave.
Yeah.
You need to unmute yourself, though.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thanks. I
Krishna.
was trying to unmute. Yeah. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. So depends where you're going. So if it is a small organization with 1 or 2 people, there might be no policies in place at that workplace. So in that case scenario, you should be upfront about yourself. Check what the owner or that place think about LGBTQ people and how they would react to that, uh, and which is difficult. But for a bigger organization, there are policies now in place wherein the inclusive culture and diversity has a big play. So before even going for an interview, just check for those companies, the policies, and what they're talking about the LGBTQ community and how they treat their people. So there is a lot of information available, as well as use the tools like LinkedIn, wherein try to connect to the people who are already working in that organization. Uh, Try to understand what is the work culture, how is the company, how are the people treated. So these kind of background checks and um, preparation would definitely help someone to find out if they are approaching a safe place or are they approaching at the right place.
Thank you, Krishna. Fantastic suggestions. Oh, Lama, you're yeah.
Sorry. I can also see Sean's comment. Some questions are not to be asked, as they are not grounds on which one can discriminate. I want them to know that they shouldn't offer things that can be used to discriminate against them. Don't give them a stick that they can hit you with, even though such discrimination is illegal. And that is 100% true. That is one thing that I also wanted to note, is that some interview questions are illegal. Things like marital status, your sexual orientation, your gender identity, whether or not you have a partner, things like that are illegal to ask. And there are ways, we can talk about it later on, there are ways that we can navigate that as well. But let's just continue with the discussion. And Brandon, ensure that you are aware of workers' right in interviews and at work, what types of questions are appropriate related to experience and skill versus inappropriate, marital status, gender, sexual orientation. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, these are great suggestions. So in terms of rights, making sure that Afia is aware of her rights going into that job interview. In terms of realities, that sort of researching the workplace culture, as Krishna suggests, and some of the ways to do that. So you've already brought to the surface some really important strategies on how to navigate the different, the interview space.
Mm-hmm. Now, Charlene, do you think we can move on to second slide, or?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so Charlene, that's yours.
Okay, thank you. So one of the pieces that you'll want to be working with when supporting newcomers towards, say, accessing jobs, accessing healthcare, is helping them find, steer towards employers, service providers that will be queer and trans friendly, will be culturally supportive. And so you may need to ask some questions in order to get a sense of what's most helpful, as well as you may be in a position to be sometimes sharing information about the newcomer that you're working with. For example, if you're serving as a reference, that kind of thing. And so want to share a few strategies when you're in that position. Again, being really aware of the fact that queer and trans newcomers are navigating their safety across many different contexts. And so you do need to kind of plan with them and seek their consent whenever you're making those referrals or sharing information. And so we suggest questions like, what can I share with your potential employer when they call for a reference? What name or pronoun should I use? People may be using different pronouns in different contexts. Don't assume that just because you use one set of pronouns that that's what's going to be true everywhere. What are you comfortable with sharing about your experience in Canada? Again, being mindful of the questions that employers can't ask, but at the same time knowing that you do need to be able to say some things about yourself. And so having the conversation ahead of time in that open way. And then if there are specific challenges, and if people have switched identity documents, changed names, made sure that their gender aligns on their identity documents, and so they may have sort of education transcripts, things like that in different names. Having a conversation ahead of time about how to handle that with potential employers, with service providers, so that there's, people are not kind of encountering that shock or push unprepared. When you do need to ask a sensitive question, we have a couple of steps that we recommend. One is kind of preparing people. So can I ask a personal question? For example, can I ask about your transition support? Share why you need to know. So, if you share this with me, it will help me identify better service providers for you, or it'll help me help you connect with a doctor that's most appropriate. Ask in a respectful way, those sort of open questions. And then again, keep kind of intersectionality in mind. What somebody says is okay in one context may not be okay in another. So, it's sort of check in each step of the way. As much as possible, share how you're going to use that information then as well, so that people, again, can give you informed consent about how to share personal information.
We can move to the second part of Afia's story, where she says, my landlord knew I was looking for work and could tell I was nervous about how long it was taking. He knew the owner of a warehouse. He introduced me and introduced me. The man hired me to do accounts. I'm not really using my financing skills, but at least I'm working with accounts. I don't mind the work. It is the boss that makes me anxious. Most of other workers are also immigrants, and the owner is so rude to them. When he gets angry, he yells, calls them racist names. It is truly degrading, and the way he puts people down. I try to keep out of his way. I'm the only woman on his staff. I can't imagine what he'd do if he found out that I'm a lesbian. I don't tell my circle members, sponsors. I don't let my circle members and or sponsors meet me after work because I don't want him to see them and get ideas. So again, let's have the same discussion in regards to her second experience in here, where she actually got a job in a warehouse working in accounts. However, it's dealing with management. A management that probably in this warehouse, it sounds like it's an old boys club where the management is not only not hiring other women, but also they are apparently racist. They have a temper issue apparently. So what are the rights in comparison to realities and the strategies that Afia would need to know for that one?
And again, if you feel like kind of coming into the interaction space, just put your hand up and Adam will be able to bring you in. Otherwise, you're very welcome to put ideas in the chat, but we'd really like to hear, again, sort of what rights does Afia need to know about?
Mm-hmm.
And, she's encountering the realities. What rights does she need to know about? Oh, wonderful. We've got both Gloria and Sean. Yeah.
Gloria, please feel free to unmute yourself. You can also take this.
So in this regards, despite there being a right of anyone being able to work anywhere, despite their sexuality, when you are especially a newcomer and maybe desperate for work, you take anything. So I'd say sometimes you have to keep your sexuality on the low, especially at the beginning. Just don't be out to everyone, screaming at everyone, I'm lesbian, I'm gay. Especially once you've already learned about the work culture and the people who work there. And especially in her case, the fact that she was desperate, she really needs money, she'd have to keep it on the low, just ensure that she seems to be the only woman there. She can't go screaming out of her voice that she's lesbian and all that, because just the being aware part that we've been talking about, and especially given the fact that it's a warehouse, she's a woman, you never know what people might plot against her. So she might have to know that it's rightful for her to work there, but she cannot just be out there putting how much of a queer person she is to her colleagues and her boss, and maybe start looking for another job, using that to build her Canadian experience as she looks for another job that might be safer for her, but just being aware and cautious at all times, and especially given her gender and the environment in which she is, just staying safe.
Yeah, so I hear your suggestion that you do a little bit of what we would call safety planning. How can she stay safe for now?
Yes.
While also looking for, researching what are some other places she could work where she'd feel safer and be respected.
Yes.
Nice. Thank you, Gloria. Sean, you wanted to?
Yeah, I was going to agree with Gloria. I mean, lots of things in this world and our country suck, like they really do. But she's not going to change the work environment at this moment. So it would be better for her to move on, to figure out another, to be quiet for a little while, as much as I hate that. But she's going to get fired, and it's going to be for some reason other than being lesbian. And then it's going to be like, that's what's going to happen to her. And this is, she works for a bigot. He's going to find a reason to do this. I don't think she probably wants to work for a bigot. I don't think any of us want to work for a bigot. But I doubt very much that we're going to make any difference on an individual level. So I think she has to kind of like hide her light under her bushel a little bit and move on from the experience. We've had folks who have ended up having end up being employed under the table. And we've sort of said, they sort of said, just a minute, you're not going to pay my taxes, and how's all it work? And they've moved on, like, once they realized there were situations that were going on. But I honestly, I wish I could say that her activism in this case could change the world for her employer. I doubt it will. Like, there's a lot of horrible stuff that still happens in this country. And like Gloria said, she should learn from the experience and move on, and hopefully she will learn to avoid these things. In hopefully our society will evolve, so we will stop having these problems. But it would be naive to think that you're not going to. A lot of people don't. We have newcomers that we've sponsored that work for the federal government and are not out to their employers.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't. I mean, I work for the federal government. I can't see why you wouldn't be, but my experience is different. So I think safety is the important thing, and I would like to think that we can begin to change the world, and that she will begin to change the world. But I don't think in this particular case, in the position she's in, with all the other things that are happening, and she's desperate for a job, that sort of thing. I don't think that she's going to. I unfortunately, I want her to win, but I don't think she's going to win.
Okay.
other than by leaving,
Yeah, and so I'm hearing both of you agreeing that safety is the first priority, and then how do you have conversations with people about what you're experiencing at work is wrong, the discrimination, the bigotry is wrong, and making sure that people are aware of their rights to a safe workplace and things like that, while at the same time encouraging people to make a decision that prioritizes their safety and their well-being over time. And we've got, I think is it Salam?
Salem, yes.
Salem, thank you, sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I'm actually a newcomer to myself, and I'm just I'm just gonna talk about my experience of myself. So it's unfortunately a lot of newcomers and refugees who come to Canada, they agreed for like the minimum job with the minimum wage with maximum job or tasks they can do, which is sometimes like we don't have the self-esteem. It's very low, and we cannot talk about like we just agree to anything, right? So on my experience, I started to learn to stand up to myself, and if I don't like the job, I won't take it, because I know my rights now. I know where can I go or where I can develop my skills, and this is what we should share with the people that they are coming to, and that's my opinion. I'm sorry, but I cannot like understand an employer screaming at me or anything else. Like even if I'm like, yeah, that's my opinion. That's me. Sorry.
Yeah, no, this is exactly where we want to have the conversation, because each person has to prioritize their own sense of what feels safe and, we'll say, just enough, and what they will and won't tolerate. And what we need to do with newcomers, I'd say, is as help them make decisions based on accurate information about their rights. It is not right that an employer does this. Realities, you have the right to change jobs, you have the right to seek recourse, and then talk through those possibilities. And then I'm seeing some really wonderful suggestions. I think it's from Abi, around ways that if Afia stays in this job, for a while, to both for her safety and because she needs the income for now, that she could do things like keeping a record of the incidents, making a note of dates, times, who's present, so that if she does decide at some point to pursue recourse, she's got an accurate record. It also gives, a sense of kind of validation to be doing this, and to kind of keeping a record can be very helpful. So all of these things are really strong strategies to talk through and sort of, again, help with the decision making, but always putting the decision back in the hands of the newcomer.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Charlene. I think Adam is going to take this one.
I don't think so, but I'm always happy to jump and talk about it.
Awesome. Okay.
So yeah, in the Padlet I shared in the beginning of the webinar, I shared the link, and you can always see the LGBTQ refugee resettlement journey. So what they are doing and the challenges they face, and what we think should be done. We worked on this with the government of Canada, and you will find a copy of it in the Padlet. You'll also receive a copy of this webinar, sorry, a recording of this webinar and the Padlet tomorrow in your email, so you can have it as well. Other than that, if you haven't registered for the next webinar, please do. I'll share the link in the chat right now. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Adam. So we have come to the end of our session. However, we do have a bunch of resources for you as well. So things that were mentioned during the session, we have some links for you. We also have some national resources specifically on the employment rights and responsibilities. So again, as we said in the beginning, ideally, we would want folks to be able to pursue jobs in a safe environment. That's not the reality of things, unfortunately, but that's why there are laws in place and there are resources that we can reach out to when the time is right. Of course, everyone has to choose their paddles. But the Canadian Employment Equity Act is there to provide folks with information about their rights and their responsibilities. Rights in a workplace, the first two websites are from like legit resources that are valid. There's also laws on anti-discrimination in a workplace, and I have a little tiny PDF resource on how to handle illegal interview questions. There's always ways to go about that. You can decline a question, you can try to understand the question behind the question. Why am I being asked this question? How is that related to the job interview? And I think it's a conversation that it's important for us to have with newcomers. Just explain to them, just because someone is asking you, are you married? That doesn't mean that they want to know that you're married. It is an illegal question. If you would like to know why or whether I'm not married or not, just tell me, how's that related to the job interview? And questions like that, again, as a reminder, the questions like that are only legal to ask about the question behind the question when it's asked to all candidates to the job interview. So if we know that someone is, the other candidates have not been asked that question, then it's probably a big red flag. So we'll just stay away from it. But other than that, Sherilyn, do you have anything to add?
Just want to thank everyone for the excellent ideas and discussion that you brought to this webinar, and just give you a sense of some of the next steps in this project. So we have, as Adam mentioned, oh yeah, we don't need that slide, sorry.
Oh, no,
That's okay. Yeah, we can just stay on the thank you slide. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah. As Adam mentioned, we have another webinar coming up December 8th. And what we're doing is using these webinars to build a bit of a resource hub where sponsors will be able to come access the webinar. We're also building additional tools. So there will be a specific sort of like an infographic about how to host conversations on the rights, realities, strategies, recourses, and resources around jobs and employment, around housing search, around personal safety. And so, do keep your eyes on your email from us about opportunities to engage in future webinars. And when we launch the Resource Hub, we'll be really happy to share that with you. So thank you all for the work that you do as sponsors, as organizations, kind of mobilizing and energizing sponsorship groups. This is important solidarity work. We at Rainbow Refugee and in the Rainbow Coalition very much see sponsorship as an extension of kind of the queer and trans tradition of mutual support in communities. Call it chosen family, call it created kin. Community solidarity is how we've survived for generations, and it's a big, we would like to continue to build that tradition across borders. And so thank you all for being here, and look forward to seeing many of you back on December 8th.
Thank you, everyone.